What if I told you that the most powerful fertilizer for your garden isn't in a bag, a bottle, or at the garden center, but already sitting in your lawn? Clippings, your kitchen scraps, and those piles of fall leaves. For decades, composting has been the go-to solution for gardeners. But compost piles can be slow, messy, and frustrating, often taking 6 months or more while losing precious nitrogen to the air. The smell of ammonia. That's your soil's fertility disappearing today. More and more gardeners are turning to a faster, cleaner, and surprisingly simple alternative: fermentation in just 3 to 6 weeks. Fermentation can transform ordinary waste into a nutrient-dense soil amendment, retaining up to 3 times more nitrogen than compost, suppressing harmful pathogens and delivering minerals in plant-ready form. No endless turning, no heavy lifting, no foul odors. In this video, we'll explore why fermentation is reshaping home gardening and why it may be the most practical soil-building method you've never tried. Part 1. The core difference: fermentation versus composting. Now let's begin with the most important question. What truly sets fermentation apart from traditional composting? Traditional composting depends on aerobic decomposition. In other words, it requires oxygen and heat. That means constant turning, balancing carbon and nitrogen carefully, and waiting months before you see usable results. Most compost piles take 6 to 12 months, and during that long process, you often lose a huge portion of nutrients. In fact, studies show composting can release 30 to 60% of nitrogen into the air as ammonia gas. If you've ever smelled that sharp odor, that's your soil's fertility literally vanishing. By contrast, fermentation is anaerobic. It thrives without oxygen, powered by lactic acid bacteria and similar microbes. These organisms lock nutrients into stable organic acids instead of losing nitrogen. You preserve it instead of letting potassium, calcium, and magnesium leach away. Fermentation holds on to them in a form that plants can actually use. And here's a striking data point. According to a 2021 study, fermented material contained 3.54% nitrogen, compared to just 1.16% in compost. Even more impressive, the carbon content was more than doubled. That means richer soil, stronger plants, and faster results with fermentation. You get usable material in as little as 3 to 6 weeks, not half a year or more. So when you compare the two side by side, the choice becomes clear. Composting has its place, but fermentation offers speed, efficiency, and nutrient retention that traditional methods simply cannot match. Part 2: Nutrient retention and bioavailability. Next, let's talk about one of the greatest strengths of fermentation: nutrient retention and bioavailability. Fermentation doesn't simply hold nutrients in place, it actually transforms them into forms that plants can absorb more easily. Here's how it works during fermentation. Organic acids like lactic acid and acetic acid act as natural chelators. They bind to important minerals such as iron, zinc, and manganese, preventing those nutrients from becoming locked in the soil where roots can't reach them. Instead, the minerals stay soluble, ready for uptake, right when your plants need them most. Even more impressive, lactic acid bacteria stimulate the production of natural plant hormones like indole, acetic acid, or IAA. This hormone encourages stronger root branching, which means your plants can explore more soil, absorb more water, and take in more nutrition. By contrast with traditional composting, nutrients are often lost over time. Nitrogen, especially, can be depleted by the time the compost is finally ready. Fermentation flips that script, retaining nutrients and delivering them in a plant-available package. So, not only are you keeping fertility in your garden, you're making it work smarter and harder for healthier, more productive plants. Part 3: Pathogen suppression and soil health. Now let's move on to another powerful advantage of fermentation: its ability to protect plants from disease and build long-term soil health. The secret lies in the acidic environment created during the process, with a pH that drops to around 3.5 to 4.0, harmful bacteria and fungi simply cannot thrive. Scientific studies have confirmed that lactic acid bacteria can actively suppress serious soil-borne diseases such as Fusarium and Pythium, which are common threats to vegetables and ornamentals alike. Instead of chemicals, you're using biology to defend your plants. At the same time, fermentation encourages beneficial fungi, like mycorrhizae. These fungi form partnerships with plant roots, expanding the root system's reach and improving nutrient and water uptake. In other words, fermentation doesn't just block the bad, it promotes the good, and through a process called competitive exclusion. Beneficial microbes outcompete pathogens for food and space, creating a soil ecosystem that favors health over disease. The result is clear. Plants grown with fermented amendments are more resilient, experience fewer outbreaks, and reduce the gardener's reliance on chemical treatments. That's healthier soil, stronger plants, and a safer garden environment overall. Part 4. Step-by-step practical method. So how exactly can you start fermenting organic waste at home? The good news is the method is simple, affordable, and works in any garden setting. Let's walk through the process, step by step. First, you'll need the right container. A food-grade 5-gallon bucket with a tight lid works perfectly. For best results, add an airlock or run a small tube from the lid into a jar of water. This lets carbon dioxide escape without letting oxygen in. Next, focus on the recipe ratio. Aim for about 60% fresh clippings or scraps and 40% water by volume. Pack your materials lightly, leaving 2 inches of headspace at the top. Then add your inoculant. You can use 1/4 cup of rice wash water for each gallon or 1 tablespoon of effective microorganisms, often called them. Both options supply the beneficial bacteria needed to kick. Start the process. Don't forget the molasses, 2 tablespoons per gallon, provide the sugars that microbes need to multiply quickly. Temperature matters too. Keep your container between 70 and 85 degrees Fahrenheit. Too cold and fermentation slows too hot, and you risk harming the microbes. Now watch for signs of success within the first week. You should see bubbles in the airlock and notice a pleasant sweet sour aroma. After 3 to 6 weeks, the mixture will turn a golden brown color, and bubbling will slow. That's when it's ready. Finally, a safety note for seniors. If lifting a 5-gallon bucket feels heavy, switch to smaller containers or mason jars. Label each batch with the start date and ingredients, so you always know what stage it's in. With these straightforward steps, you'll have your very first batch of fermented garden gold ready in no time. Part 5. How to apply fermented materials. Now that you know how to make it, let's talk about how to use fermented materials effectively in your garden. The beauty of fermentation is its versatility. First, as a soil amendment, simply mix about 1 inch of fermented matter into your garden beds, roughly 1 inch per square foot. This light incorporation reduces compaction in heavy clay soils, while in sandy soils, it greatly improves water retention. Next, consider using it as a top dressing spread. The fermented material evenly around the base of your plants, but remember to keep it at least 1 inch away from stems to prevent any risk of burn over time. Rainfall and watering will gently move those nutrients into the root zone. Finally, one of the most powerful uses is as a liquid fertilizer. Strain off the liquid portion, dilute it at a ratio of 1:10 for soil drenching or 1:10, 20:30 for foliar sprays. Always apply during the cool hours of the morning or evening to avoid leaf scorch. Gardeners who use fermented amendments regularly report greener leaves, faster flowering, sturdier stems, and noticeably fewer pest problems compared to using compost alone. In short, fermented materials are flexible, potent, and designed to fit seamlessly into any gardening routine. Part 6. Expanded materials beyond lawn clippings. So far, we've focused on grass clippings, but fermentation is far more versatile than that. Let's look at the wide range of materials you can process successfully. To begin with, kitchen scraps work beautifully. Think vegetable peels, fruit, rinds, coffee grounds, and even crushed eggshells. Instead of sending them to the landfill, you can recycle them into concentrated plant nutrition. Next, consider fall leaves when chopped. They ferment much faster than they would decompose in a compost pile, giving you a steady source of organic matter throughout the cooler months. Even weeds can be valuable thanks to the low pH of fermentation. Most seeds are destroyed, meaning you can turn what was once a nuisance into a safe amendment for something more targeted. Try banana peels combined with coffee grounds together. They create a potassium-rich blend, perfect for fruiting plants and flowering ornamentals. And if you have access to the coast, seaweed is a powerhouse. It is rich in trace minerals and natural plant hormones, and research shows fermented seaweed extracts can boost root mass, increase yields, improve drought resistance, and even reduce fungal disease. Finally, even paper and cardboard can be processed if shredded and balanced with extra nitrogen. In short, fermentation lets you transform almost any organic waste into a nutrient-dense resource customized to your garden's needs. Part 7. Environmental Impact. Now let's step back and look at the bigger picture, because fermentation is not just good for your garden, it's good for the planet. First, it creates a lower carbon footprint. Traditional compost piles release large amounts of carbon dioxide and ammonia as they break down fermentation. On the other hand, traps those nutrients inside stable organic acids, which means fewer greenhouse gases escape into the atmosphere. Second, fermentation supports carbon sequestration. The stable compounds produced during the process persist in the soil much longer than fresh organic matter. This locks carbon underground, improving soil fertility while reducing the amount released into the air. Third, it drives waste. Reduction, grass clippings, food scraps, and fall leaves that would normally end up in landfills can be transformed right at home. That means less waste in garbage trucks and less methane generated in landfills. Just imagine this. If every American household fermented its lawn clippings instead of throwing them away, millions of tons of organic waste could be recycled into soil fertility instead of producing methane gas. That is a massive win for both gardeners and the environment. Part 8. Troubleshooting common issues. Of course, like any gardening method, fermentation can run into small challenges. The key is knowing how to recognize the signs and fix them quickly. First, if you notice a bad smell, that usually means too much oxygen got inside or the materials were contaminated. The solution is simple. Clean your container thoroughly. Adjust your ratios and start again. A proper batch should smell pleasantly sour, not rotten. Second, if you see a thin white film on top, don't worry. That's called calm yeast, and it's harmless. Just skim it off and continue the process. Third, if there's no bubbling activity, the temperature may be too low, or your inoculant may not be active enough. Try moving the container to a warmer spot or add a fresh splash of rice. Wash water to boost the microbes. Finally, if your bucket starts swelling, the airlock may be clogged. Release the pressure carefully and check for blockages. This step ensures gases can escape safely without breaking the seal with these quick fixes. In mind, you'll find that most issues are easy to correct, and each batch gets smoother as you gain experience. Part 9. Safety and accessibility for seniors. Now let's focus on something especially important for older gardeners: safety and accessibility. Gardening should bring joy, not strain, and fermentation can be adapted to fit your comfort level. To begin with, avoid heavy lifting by using rolling carts or dollies to move buckets. This small change protects your back and joints. Next, think about container size. Instead of a 5-gallon bucket, try smaller options like 1-gallon jars or sturdy plastic containers. These are perfect for balcony or patio gardening and are much easier to handle. It's also smart to wear gloves when handling fermented liquid. While it's safe for soil, the mildly acidic nature may irritate sensitive skin. And finally, always place your buckets in shaded, stable spots. This prevents overheating in summer and reduces tripping hazards in the garden or on a patio. With these adjustments, fermentation remains not only effective, but also safe and enjoyable, even for seniors who want to keep gardening active without unnecessary physical stress. Part 10. Long-term results. Finally, let's look at the long-term impact of using fermented amendments, because the real magic happens over time. First, fermentation helps build soil organic matter faster than compost, enriching the soil with stable compounds that last season after season. This means every application doesn't just feed your plants, it improves the foundation of your garden. Second, consistent use creates more resilient soils with higher water retention for gardeners in hot or dry regions. This translates into less watering and healthier crops. During stress periods, third, fermentation reduces dependence on external fertilizers by recycling your own waste into a powerful soil amendment. You spend less money at the garden center and rely less on synthetic chemicals. And fourth, it encourages biodiversity in the soil. Beneficial microbes multiply, earthworms thrive, and the ecosystem becomes self-sustaining over the years. These cumulative benefits add up. Your soil becomes richer, your plants become stronger, and gardening becomes easier for seniors. That means less work, fewer inputs, and more reliable harvests. Season after season. Part 11. Limitations and considerations. As powerful as fermentation is, it's important to understand its limits and use it wisely. Let's go through a few key considerations. First, never ferment materials contaminated with pesticides or herbicides. Residues from these chemicals may persist through the process and end up in your soil, potentially harming beneficial microbes and even your crops. Always choose clean, untreated inputs. Second, highly woody materials like thick branches or large stems are not suitable. These break down too slowly in anaerobic conditions. If you want to use them, chop them very finely or compost them aerobically instead. Third, remember that fermented material is acidic. This is part of what makes it so effective, but it also means you must always dilute liquid applications. If applied undiluted, it can burn leaves or tender roots. Stick to the recommended ratios, such as 1:10 for soil, drench, or 1:20 for foliar sprays. And finally, keep in mind that fermentation is not a complete replacement for all composting materials that are very high in carbon, like sawdust or woody debris, still benefit from traditional aerobic composting. By respecting these boundaries, you can get the maximum benefit from fermentation while avoiding common pitfalls. Part 12. Why fermentation is the future. So why is fermentation often called the future of home gardening? The answer lies in its unique blend of practicality, efficiency, and sustainability. Unlike traditional compost piles that take months, fermentation works in just weeks. It's low cost, needing only a container, a simple inoculant, and scraps you already have. It's also space efficient, making it ideal for small yards, patios, and even apartments. And, importantly, it's environmentally friendly, keeping nutrients in place while reducing greenhouse gas emissions for American seniors. Looking for gardening methods that are safe, manageable, and rewarding? Fermentation truly checks every box. It requires minimal effort, no turning, no heavy lifting, no complex ratios. It offers a quick turnaround, giving you usable material in 3 to 6 weeks. It produces healthier plants by boosting microbial life and making nutrients more available, and at the same time, it supports a greener planet, reducing waste and contributing to long-term soil carbon storage. Put simply, fermentation combines convenient science and sustainability into one powerful practice. That's why more gardeners are embracing it, not just as an alternative to composting, but as the next step in growing smarter. Closing, bringing it all together. In the end, fermentation is more than just another gardening trick. It's a method that saves time, protects nutrients, and strengthens the soil ecosystem. Compared to composting, it is faster, cleaner, and more efficient, while still being easy enough for any gardener to try. Whether you're recycling kitchen scraps, lawn clippings, or even seaweed from the shore, fermentation transforms waste into valuable nutrition that plants can use immediately for seniors. This means gardening with less strain and more reward for the environment. It means less waste, fewer emissions, and healthier soils for future generations. And for your garden, it means stronger roots, greener leaves, and better harvests. So the next time you think about tossing out grass, clippings, or food scraps, pause and remember you're holding the raw ingredients for a powerful soil amendment. All it takes is a bucket, a little preparation, and a few weeks of patience. If you found this information helpful, don't forget to subscribe for more practical gardening insights. Share this video with fellow gardeners who are ready to try something new together. We can turn everyday waste into garden gold, one fermentation bucket at a time.